I'm 30F, my fiancé 35M, canceled our wedding to marry someone else and invited me to theirs. If someone had told me a year ago that my life would turn into the kind of drama you'd find on a Reddit thread, I wouldn't have believed it. But here I am. I'm 30 years old, and until a few months ago, I was engaged to a man I'd been with for 7 years. Everything seemed perfect, until it wasn't. We met in college during a group project in our senior year. He was the funny, charismatic type who could make friends with anyone, and I was the organized, practical one who made sure the project actually got done. We started dating soon after and stayed together through his grad school years and my climb up the corporate ladder. Our friends used to joke that we were the power couple who had it all figured out. Last year, after years of hinting and some not-so-subtle prodding from my family, he finally proposed. It was a big, over-the-top moment on a weekend getaway to a beach resort. He had the waiter bring out a dessert plate with "Will you marry me?" written in chocolate sauce. My family was thrilled, my friends were jealous, and for the first time in years, I thought, this is it. We're really doing this. Planning the wedding was a whirlwind. I dove headfirst into it, picking out venues, sampling cakes, and putting deposits down on everything from the florist to the photographer. I'll admit, I took charge of the planning. It's just who I am. I like things organized, and I wanted our wedding to be perfect. He seemed happy to let me handle it, though there were moments when he seemed distant. I chalked it up to work stress. His job had been demanding lately, and he was always complaining about long hours and office politics. Looking back, there were red flags. Small ones at first, like the way he kept his phone on silent all the time or how he'd disappear into the other room to take a work call. One time, I saw a late-night text pop up from someone named Samantha, but when I asked about it, he shrugged it off, saying she was a coworker asking about a project. I didn't push. Why would I? We'd been together for 7 years. I trusted him. 2 months before the wedding, everything unraveled. It started with him missing an important appointment to tour the venue. He claimed it was an emergency at work, but I could feel something was off. That night, he came home unusually quiet, pacing around the living room like he didn't know how to start a conversation. And then he said it, the words I'll never forget, "I can't do this. I'm calling off the wedding." At first, I thought he was having a breakdown. I tried to calm him down, but then he hit me with the real reason. He wasn't calling off the wedding because of cold feet. He was calling it off because he'd reconnected with someone else, a coworker, no less, and had fallen in love. The worst part? He wasn't just ending things with me to pursue her. He'd already proposed to her and was planning their wedding. Oh, and he wanted me to attend to keep things amicable. I was in shock. How do you even process something like that? 7 years together, and he's marrying someone else before our wedding date even passes. I spent the next week in a daze, canceling vendors, dealing with non-refundable deposits, and trying to explain to my family what had happened without breaking down. They were furious. My mom wanted to confront him, and my friends were ready to egg his car. But amidst the chaos, a strange thought crept in. What if I went to his wedding? Not to make a scene or cause drama, but to see it for myself. Maybe I thought it would give me closure, or maybe I just wanted to see if he'd actually go through with it. Either way, I decided to go. I didn't tell many people, just a few close friends who tried to talk me out of it. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things I'd missed before. Mutual friends told me they'd seen him with her months ago, looking a little too cozy for just coworkers. There were whispers that she'd been pushing him to end things with me for a while, and that their relationship wasn't as new as he'd claimed. It hurt, but it also made me realize this wasn't my fault. I'd been loyal and loving, and he'd made his choices. On the financial side, things were messy. He'd left me to handle the fallout from the canceled wedding, including the venue deposit we couldn't get back. When I asked him to split the costs, he acted like I was being unreasonable, claiming he was strapped for cash because of his upcoming wedding. The audacity was mind-blowing. I won't lie, part of me wanted to disappear, to block him and never look back. But another part of me, the stubborn part, refused to let him rewrite the narrative. If he was going to pull something like this, I wasn't going to fade into the background. So I RSVP'd yes to his wedding invitation. I didn't know it then, but that decision would change everything. What happened at his wedding, and the fallout afterward, set off a chain of events I could never have predicted. Update 1. The invitation arrived a week after I'd RSVP'd online. It was formal, almost annoyingly so, with embossed gold lettering and an overly cheerful tone. Tucked inside was a handwritten note from him. It was short but managed to make me roll my eyes. "I hope you'll come and understand this is the right path for me. Let's keep things amicable." Amicable, sure. When I showed the invitation to my parents, their reaction was exactly what I expected. My mom looked ready to drive to his house and demand answers. My dad, always the quiet one, sat there shaking his head and muttering about how people don't have any shame these days. They both thought I was crazy for even considering going, but I stood my ground. I didn't want to argue. I just told them I needed to do this for myself. That didn't stop my mom from texting me every other day, though, trying to talk me out of it. Not long after, I found out who the new bride actually was. It was Samantha, the coworker he'd been texting late at night, the one I'd brushed off because I trusted him. Turns out they'd been seeing each other behind my back for months, maybe even longer. A mutual friend spilled the tea during a lunch meetup, sharing how everyone in his office had apparently seen this coming. That was news to me. The audacity didn't end there. Social media became its own battlefield. Word about their engagement spread fast, and mutual friends were stunned. A few unfriended him immediately. Others messaged me privately, expressing their disbelief and asking how I was holding up. It was awkward, to say the least. Some tried to stay neutral, but the whole situation left everyone divided. Even his family seemed split. A cousin I'd always been close with called to say she couldn't believe what he was doing, especially inviting me. Still, I wasn't going to show up at that wedding looking anything less than amazing. If they wanted me there, they were going to get the best version of me. I went dress shopping with my best friend, who turned it into a mini therapy session. We combed through racks of gowns until I found the one, a sleek, floor-length emerald dress that made me feel like I'd walked straight out of a movie premiere. Speaking of therapy, I'd also started seeing a professional around this time. My best friend had suggested it, and honestly, it helped. The therapist didn't push me to make sense of everything all at once, but she did encourage me to think about why I felt so compelled to attend the wedding. I didn't have a clear answer yet, but I knew I wasn't doing it for him, or for her. About a week before the wedding, my phone rang. It was him. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. He asked, awkwardly, if I was really coming, then went on about how he hoped I wouldn't make it weird. I could tell he was trying to guilt-trip me into being some kind of bigger person, but I stayed calm and told him not to worry. The call left a bad taste in my mouth, but it also reinforced my decision. In the meantime, my friends were my rock. They rallied around me with a mix of humor and fierce loyalty. When I told them about his call, one of them joked about sending me to the wedding with a petty playlist to blast during the reception. Another offered to come along as my date to keep an eye on me. It was good to have people in my corner. Then came the money argument. I'd sent him a message demanding he pay me back for the non-refundable wedding deposits I'd been stuck with. His response? A half-hearted excuse about how his financial priorities had shifted. It turned into a heated exchange, and I realized he had zero intention of paying me back. Not that I was surprised, but it was still infuriating. To top it off, I got a message from Samantha. It was polite but dripping with condescension. Thank you for being so gracious during all of this. It means a lot to us. Us. I almost laughed out loud. Gracious? That wasn't the word I'd use for my feelings, but I ignored her message and went back to journaling, a new habit I'd picked up to process everything. I even considered posting my story online, just to get it all out there. I wasn't ready yet, but the idea was tempting. The closer the wedding day got, the more divided our mutual friends became. Some were skipping it entirely, refusing to pick sides, while others admitted they felt obligated to go. The whole situation was a mess. I tried to stay out of it, but I could feel the tension every time I spoke to someone in our circle. The real kicker came during my dress fitting. As I was standing in front of the mirror, admiring the alterations on my gown, guess who walked into the boutique? Samantha. She froze when she saw me, and for a moment, neither of us said a word. Then she gave me a tight, forced smile before quickly heading to the other side of the store. The whole thing felt like a scene out of a bad soap opera. By the time the day of the wedding rolled around, I had my outfit ready, my plans in place, and a clear sense of what I wanted to do. My friends were split on whether this was a good idea, but I knew one thing for sure. I was walking into that venue with my head held high. What I didn't know was just how much would unfold once I got there. Update 2. The wedding day arrived faster than I expected. I parked a short distance from the venue, a fancy estate surrounded by manicured gardens and glittering fountains. As I walked toward the entrance, I caught a few curious stares. My dress, emerald green with a dramatic neckline, did exactly what I wanted it to. It turned heads. It felt like the perfect mix of I'm here and you'll regret inviting me. Inside, the venue was stunning, with floral arrangements spilling off every table and chandeliers glittering like stars. I spotted familiar faces almost immediately, but before I could approach anyone, he appeared. My ex. He looked sharp in a tailored suit, but his expression when he saw me was priceless, a mix of surprise and discomfort. He gave a stiff nod, like he wasn't sure whether to acknowledge me or pretend I wasn't there. Before he could make up his mind, the new bride swept in. Samantha's smile was overly sweet, like she'd been practicing it in the mirror. She greeted me with a quick hello, calling me by name, which somehow made it worse. She had the nerve to act like this wasn't the most awkward situation in the world. She lingered just long enough to make it clear she was keeping tabs on me before pulling him away to greet other guests. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. As I mingled around, sipping on champagne, I could feel people watching me. Some guests tried to play it cool, sneaking glances and whispering behind their hands, while others weren't subtle at all. A few old friends came up to check on me, expressing their shock that I'd actually shown up. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. When the ceremony began, I slipped into a seat near the back. The vows were uncomfortable. My ex stumbled over his words a couple of times, and at one point, I swear Samantha shot him a look sharp enough to kill. The whole thing felt off, like they were putting on a performance for everyone there. I couldn't help but notice how stiff they seemed, like the chemistry wasn't quite right. After the ceremony, the reception kicked into full swing. I found myself standing near the buffet when one of his cousins, who'd always been friendly, approached me. We started chatting, and before long, she was spilling tea. Apparently, Samantha wasn't winning any popularity contests with his family. The cousin hinted at some drama involving a pre-wedding argument, but before she could elaborate, the first round of toasts began. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it short and sweet. I thanked them for the invite and wished them the best, but there was just enough edge in my tone to make my point. The room went quiet for a moment before polite applause broke the tension. Samantha's forced smile twitched, and my ex avoided my eyes entirely. Things got even more awkward when the photographer called for a family picture. I was standing nearby, chatting with an old friend, when they asked me to step aside for the shot. It wasn't done rudely, but the timing couldn't have been worse. A few guests noticed and started whispering again. Samantha looked annoyed, and my ex, he just looked embarrassed. As the evening went on, cracks in their perfect facade became more apparent. Guests were quietly swapping stories about the timeline of their relationship, and it wasn't flattering. One particularly tipsy groomsman wandered over and let it slip that my ex had been seeing Samantha long before the wedding was called off. His exact words were something like, "It's wild, right? Everyone knew they were sneaking around. You didn't hear it from me, though." Then came the cake, a towering, multi-tiered masterpiece that collapsed halfway through the reception. Gasps rippled through the crowd as staff rushed to salvage what they could. People around me whispered about how it was a sign and a bad omen. Samantha's frustration was barely hidden, and my ex looked like he wanted to disappear. I decided to leave shortly after that. As I made my way out, I overheard what sounded like a heated argument between the newlyweds. Their voices were low, but the tension was clear. I didn't linger to catch details I'd seen enough. I walked back to my car, head held high, feeling a strange sense of closure. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing with messages. Some were from friends who'd been at the wedding, laughing about the cake and the awkward toasts. Others were from people who hadn't attended but wanted the full rundown. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat down with my journal, jotting down everything that had happened. It felt cathartic, like I was finally processing it all. That night, I realized something. I'd gone to the wedding thinking it would be about closure, or maybe about making a statement. But in the end, it wasn't about them at all. It was about me showing myself that I could face it and come out stronger on the other side. Update 3. It didn't take long for the wedding drama to spill into their honeymoon. A mutual friend texted me a week after the event, claiming the trip had been cut short due to a massive fight. Apparently, Samantha wasn't thrilled with the attention, or lack of it, she'd received during the wedding. The whispers about the collapsed cake, the awkward toasts, and my presence had overshadowed her big day, and she wasn't happy about it. My ex, unsurprisingly, didn't handle the confrontation well. They flew home early, skipping the last leg of their itinerary. Social media wasn't any kinder. Photos from the wedding started making the rounds, and the comment sections quickly turned into debates. Some people called them out for the messy timeline of their relationship, while others defended them, saying everyone deserves a shot at happiness. One post even speculated that Samantha had been planning this all along, complete with screenshots of old Instagram posts where she'd tagged him in seemingly innocent work outings. It was wild to see strangers dissecting their lives like it was the latest Netflix drama. In the middle of all this, something unexpected happened. My ex finally agreed to reimburse me for the wedding expenses. It took a bit of public shaming. One of our mutual friends casually mentioned in a group chat how unfair it was that I was left with the financial burden, but it worked. He sent me a Venmo payment with a short note for the deposits. Sorry for the delay. It wasn't exactly heartfelt, but at least I wasn't out thousands of dollars anymore. Around the same time, more gossip about Samantha started surfacing. One of my old college friends messaged me out of the blue, saying she knew Samantha from a previous job. According to her, Samantha had a reputation for stirring up drama and getting involved with taken men. It wasn't just my ex, there were rumors of at least 2 other workplace relationships that had ended in chaos. The more I heard, the more it felt like I'd dodged a bullet. Meanwhile, mutual friends started dropping hints that my ex wasn't as thrilled with married life as he'd expected. He'd confided in one of them that things weren't going as planned. Whether it was the fallout from the wedding or the reality of being married to someone as demanding as Samantha, he already seemed to have regrets. I wasn't surprised, but hearing about it so soon after their honeymoon was a little satisfying. With all this swirling around, I decided to share my story anonymously on Reddit. I didn't name names or include identifying details, but I laid out the basic timeline: 7 years together, wedding canceled, the twist of being invited to their wedding. The post blew up almost immediately, with thousands of comments pouring in. Most were supportive, some shared similar experiences, and a few gave me advice about moving on. It was strangely comforting to know I wasn't alone. In therapy, I started unpacking why I'd felt so strongly about attending their wedding. At first, I thought it was about getting closure, but my therapist helped me see it differently. Showing up wasn't about them, it was about reclaiming my narrative. I didn't want to hide or let them dictate how I handled the situation. That realization felt like a breakthrough. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message from Samantha. It was short and polite, thanking me for being so understanding about everything. But something about it felt insincere, like she was just checking a box. I didn't respond, and honestly, I didn't see the point. What could she possibly say that would make any of this better? The fallout also made me rethink some of my friendships. A few people who tried to stay neutral during the drama were now reaching out, but their late attempts at support felt hollow. On the flip side, some friends who'd stood by me throughout all of this became even closer. It was a tough but necessary shift. With the dust starting to settle, I decided to focus on myself. I picked up a new hobby, painting, and even started researching opportunities to move to a new city. A fresh start felt like exactly what I needed. Work was going well, and I started taking on projects that challenged me in new ways. While I was moving forward, my ex and Samantha seemed to be spiraling. Word got out that they were struggling to pay off some of the wedding expenses. Vendors were chasing them down for unpaid bills, and rumors of a possible lawsuit started circulating. It was ironic, considering how much they'd wanted that picture-perfect wedding. One evening, I sat down and wrote a letter to myself. It wasn't something I planned to share. It was just a way to process everything that had happened. I wrote about the hurt, the betrayal, but also the growth. By the time I finished, I felt like I'd closed a chapter of my life. I even started dipping my toes back into dating. Nothing serious, just casual outings with people who treated me with kindness and respect. It was a stark contrast to what I'd gotten used to in my previous relationship. A few months later, I heard the inevitable. Samantha and my ex were already having major issues. Mutual friends described their fights as explosive, and Samantha had reportedly moved out temporarily. Their social media presence, once filled with overly curated posts, had gone radio silent. Karma, as they say, doesn't miss. Looking back, I'm grateful for the experience. As strange as that sounds, it forced me to grow, to reevaluate my priorities, and to focus on myself for the first time in years. Life is far from perfect, but it's mine, and for the first time, that feels like enough. Update 4. It didn't take long for cracks in their marriage to become public knowledge. A few months after their wedding, I started hearing rumors from mutual friends that Samantha had been seen out with another man. At first, it sounded like idle gossip, but then the stories started stacking up. She wasn't exactly being discreet. She'd been spotted at a wine bar, laughing and leaning into someone who was definitely not my ex. Around the same time, my ex reached out to me out of the blue. I almost didn't recognize his number, but curiosity got the better of me. He started the conversation awkwardly, claiming he wanted to clear the air. What followed was a mix of vague apologies and thinly veiled complaints about his marriage. He said he felt trapped and that things weren't turning out how he'd imagined. The subtext was clear: he was fishing to see if I'd give him any sympathy. I didn't. Instead, I reminded him that he made his choices, and I wasn't going to entertain any revisionist history. As if things weren't messy enough, Samantha's social media started getting interesting. She posted a series of cryptic quotes about betrayal and disappointment, all while scrubbing her profile of any pictures with my ex. The comments section on one of her posts turned into a battlefield, with friends and acquaintances asking outright if everything was okay. She didn't respond, but the writing was on the wall. Then came the dinner party story. A mutual friend who attended a gathering at their house told me it was a disaster. What started as casual drinks escalated into a full-blown argument between my ex and Samantha. They weren't shy about airing their grievances in front of everyone, and the details weren't pretty. He accused her of being distant and disrespectful, while she threw back accusations of his failure to live up to her expectations. Guests started leaving early, uncomfortable with the scene. Not long after that, rumors of a divorce started circulating. Someone in Samantha's circle claimed she'd already consulted a lawyer and was planning to file. The story gained traction when a few mutual friends noticed her moving some of her belongings out of their shared home. If the honeymoon was a train wreck, their marriage was a full-blown derailment. What followed was even more chaotic. Their dirty laundry spilled onto social media. My ex posted a long, rambling status about how love isn't always what it seems, clearly fishing for sympathy. Samantha fired back with a story post accusing him of being manipulative and self-centered. It was like watching a soap opera unfold in real time, except these were real people, and they'd invited everyone to grab popcorn and watch. For me, the whole thing was oddly satisfying. Karma had taken its sweet time, but it had arrived in full force. Seeing their chaos unfold wasn't about revenge, it was about closure. They were living with the consequences of their actions, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free from it all. But then came the message. Out of nowhere, Samantha reached out to me. Her tone was accusatory, claiming that my decision to attend their wedding had caused unnecessary strain on their relationship. She implied that my presence had been a deliberate attempt to stir the pot. It was so absurd I couldn't even be angry. I didn't respond. Let her spin her narrative however she wanted. It wasn't my problem. My ex, meanwhile, was on an apology tour. He started reaching out to mutual friends and family members, trying to smooth things over and repair his image. It didn't go well. By then, most people had seen enough of his true colors to realize he wasn't worth the effort. Some even cut ties entirely, fed up with his constant excuses and lack of accountability. While their lives were imploding, mine was thriving. I'd been putting all my energy into work and was rewarded with a promotion, a major milestone I'd been chasing for years. It felt like a well-timed reminder that focusing on myself was paying off. Then came the cherry on top, a surprise legal battle. Vendors from their wedding were pursuing them for unpaid bills, and word got out that Samantha was refusing to split the costs. It turned into a back-and-forth nightmare that ended with both of them lawyering up. It was poetic, really. They'd built their relationship on shaky ground, and now everything was crumbling beneath them. The final straw came when my ex messaged me one last time. It was a desperate attempt to reconnect, full of vague regret and what-ifs. I didn't bother replying. Instead, I blocked him on every platform. That chapter of my life was closed, and I wasn't about to reopen it. Looking back, it's almost surreal how things unfolded. Their downfall wasn't something I orchestrated or even wished for. It just happened, naturally, as a result of their own decisions. And while they were busy unraveling, I was building something new for myself. Life has a funny way of working out. Update 5. The past year has felt like a whirlwind, but in the best way possible. It's incredible how much can change once you decide to let go of the past and focus on what's ahead. Therapy became my anchor through all of it, and I recently celebrated a huge milestone with my therapist. For the first time, I could talk about everything: the betrayal, the wedding fiasco, the fallout, without feeling that familiar sting of resentment. It wasn't about pretending it didn't hurt anymore, but about realizing that it didn't control me. One of the most surprising turns in this journey has been meeting someone new. I wasn't actively looking, but life has a funny way of bringing people into your path when you least expect it. We met at a charity event through mutual friends, and he's been nothing but kind, supportive, and refreshingly drama-free. We've been keeping it casual, taking things slow, and for the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm in a relationship where I'm truly seen and respected. My Reddit post from a few months back continues to make waves. People still comment and send messages, sharing their own experiences or simply offering words of encouragement. It's strange but comforting to see how many strangers out there relate to my story. Some of the messages have even inspired me to start a blog where I share insights and advice for others going through betrayal or heartbreak. It's been fulfilling to turn something so painful into something that might help others. Speaking of public reactions, my ex recently made another attempt to salvage his reputation. He posted a long-winded apology on social media, framing himself as someone who had made mistakes but was growing from them. The post backfired almost immediately. People in the comments weren't buying it, calling him out for the way he handled everything. Even Samantha didn't chime in to defend him, which says a lot. Meanwhile, I've been reconnecting with friends I drifted from during the fallout. It feels good to rebuild those relationships without the shadow of my ex looming over everything. Some of them even admitted they'd felt awkward during the wedding drama, but were happy to see me thriving now. It's like piecing together parts of my old life while creating something new. One of the most cathartic moments came when I donated my unused wedding dress to a local charity that provides formal wear for women in need. Watching the dress leave my hands, knowing it could help someone else, felt symbolic, like I was finally shedding the last piece of that chapter. My family has also been a huge part of my healing. Recently, my mom apologized for pressuring me to avoid the wedding, admitting that she hadn't understood why I needed to face it head on. She told me she was proud of my strength, and that meant more than I expected. It felt like a full circle moment, with all of us moving forward together. Another big change? I moved to a new city. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. I'd been considering it for a while, but everything that happened pushed me to take the leap. Starting fresh in a place where no one knows my story has been liberating. I've thrown myself into exploring new neighborhoods, meeting people, and focusing on my career. Speaking of work, I recently received a major award for a project I've been pouring my heart into for years. It's the kind of recognition I used to dream about, and it's a reminder that life moves on, often in unexpected but beautiful ways. While my life has been moving forward, my ex's seems to be stuck in reverse. The divorce rumors were true. They finalized it just 6 months after tying the knot. Mutual friends say he's struggling financially, dealing with the fallout from their legal battles and the unpaid wedding debts. Samantha, for her part, seems to have vanished from his life completely. I don't know what she's up to, and frankly, I don't care. The one awkward moment I couldn't avoid was running into him at a coffee shop. He looked tired, like life had worn him down. He started to say something, but I gave him a polite nod and walked away. There wasn't any anger or hurt left, just pity. It was a stark contrast to how I'd felt the last time we'd crossed paths, and it reaffirmed just how far I've come. I recently posted a final update to my Reddit story, sharing how my life has changed and thanking the people who supported me through it all. The responses were overwhelming, with strangers cheering me on and offering heartfelt advice. It reminded me how connected we all are, even in the messiest moments of our lives. As I write this, I'm sitting in my new apartment, surrounded by the hum of a city that feels alive with possibilities. My story isn't tied to the past anymore, it's about what comes next. I don't know exactly what the future holds, but I know it's bright. For the first time, I feel truly free.